Hello, my name is Rin. I talk about books here, sometimes knitting, but mostly books. Today, I have a list of book recommendations for books on loneliness. I mostly read sad books. I just think that the writing and the prose in sad books is so beautiful. And somewhat ironically, I find that they make me feel a little less lonely in the world. I feel like it's nice to read about other people feeling the way that I have felt, knowing that there's people out there who understand what it's like, that I'm not alone in experiencing these feelings. And part of sad books usually includes a character being very alone, very separate from the group they want to belong to. And so that's what I'm talking about today. Some books that I think encompass the feeling of loneliness very, very well, or it's just a major central theme to the book overall. I've got kind of an array of subject matter here, so hopefully this also allows you to either diversify or find a book that really speaks to you. So the first book that I have is Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. This is translated from the Japanese by Sam Bett and David Boyd. This book follows a young boy. He's maybe 13, and he is ostracized from his schoolmates because he's bullied ruthlessly for having a lazy eye. I guess I would also warn people that the bullying is quite intense and graphic. So if that's not something that you want to read about, definitely avoid this book. He finds solace in another classmate who is a young girl who is also being bullied by the girls in their class. And so while they're together and forming a friendship, it's kind of a twisted friendship because they're so codependent on each other for any kind of human interaction because they are so lonely themselves. It's beautifully written. I'm very excited to read more of Kawakami's work. I think she just has a very real modern voice that she speaks her stories through. I highly recommend this book. It really speaks towards being in a group, why people bully, why people exclude others, and feeling on the outside and not being able to control that. I have a quote to read. Everything was beautiful. Not that there was anyone to share it with, anyone to tell, just the beauty. The next book I have is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. This is obviously a classic. If you don't know what this story is about, it follows our titular character, Jane Eyre, from a young age. Her parents passed away and she moved in with her aunt, but her aunt strongly disliked her and had her move into an orphanage. It's a very sad and dreary and strict place. When she turns 18, she applies to be a governess at a wealthy man, Mr. Rochester's estate, for his young ward. Especially in the beginning, Jane is so incredibly alone. As a child in the orphanage, she doesn't make friends. It's not encouraged. Caretakers are extremely strict and force them to live very, very simply. And you spend a lot of time with her as this lonely child. And then when she becomes the governess, it's for a large estate in the moors, very separated from other houses, and she's employed there alone for long periods of time with just the child to teach and the housekeeper to speak to. It's a very gothic and atmospheric read. There's very beautiful descriptions of the setting in this book, the atmosphere of the English countryside, and kind of this dark, misty vibe to it. It is a love story between her and Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester is a very like surly and strange kind of man, and so even though she's in love with him, she's always kind of at a distance from him emotionally, which I feel like feeds into that loneliness that she experienced. All she's kind of wanted in her life is a family and to just be a part of society. There's a lot of themes of class in this book. Throughout the book, Jane is kind of struggling internally and externally to feel like a real person despite being poor and of a lower class and kind of without a family and that connection. You see her like struggle internally with knowing that she is a good person, but society telling her because she's of a lower class, she is less important. I truly love this book, and I love just this story in general. I know that some people really dislike it, and they really dislike Mr. Rochester as a love interest, which I completely understand, but I'm sorry, I just love it. I have a quote. I care for myself. The more solitary, the more friendless, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. The next book is very different, and it's Blue Nights by Joan Didion. This is a memoir that she wrote towards the end of her life, and she kind of muses on death and grief and getting old. Her husband, John, has passed away, and I think literally a few weeks later, her adopted daughter dies as well. She really struggles in this book with being alone at the end of her life, and somewhat unexpectedly so, and how she loses touch with her friends. She also kind of touches on the fear of getting older, the fear of losing like control of your body, and how that also makes her feel quite lonely. She doesn't feel like she can tell a lot of people for fear that she will end up in a home somewhere. This is my second Joan Didion, and I really, really enjoyed it. She writes in this somewhat like analytical, quite straightforward way, which I think can be somewhat off-putting for some people when you're handling such emotional subject matter. But I think despite this more straightforward way of writing, you can still really feel her emotions coming through. She kind of repeats certain lines throughout the memoir, which connect different pieces of her memories and her life together, and that really just enhances how she's processing these emotions and these events. This is a really, really sad book. It was extremely heartbreaking and difficult to read, even though it was only like 180 pages. It really impacted me. I also have a quote from this one. I know what fear is. The fear is not what is lost. What is lost is already in the wall. What's lost is already behind locked doors. The fear is for what is still to be lost. The next book I want to recommend with a lot of caution. It's My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book is about pedophilia and grooming, and it gets really graphic and intense and was honestly extremely disgusting, and I wanted to vomit reading certain sections of it. So I do want to caution people about this one. You follow the main character in two different timelines. One is when she's a teenager and her English teacher at her boarding school is grooming her. The other is when she is 30 and her English teacher has just committed suicide, and she's approached by his other victims. She kind of struggles because she doesn't necessarily see herself as a victim and has struggled to accept that what happened to her was grooming. And so you watch in one timeline the horrific actions unfold, and in the other timeline her working to come to terms with everything. Extremely painful and depressing novel. In both timelines, she's quite lonely. As a teenager, she doesn't quite fit in with her other classmates. And once her English professor starts giving her attention, she really latches onto it. He's obviously trying to isolate her even more so that she's more easily preyed upon. And then as she's grown up, she's never really gotten over what happens. Her life is still kind of a mess, and she hasn't really figured out what to do, like a career or any goals in her life. So you see her living quite alone and watching her process her pain of the trauma and learn how to move forward. Sometimes it feels like that's all I'm doing every time I reach out, trying to haunt, to drag him back in time, asking him to tell me what happened, make me understand it once and for all, because I'm still stuck here and I can't move on. The last book that I want to recommend is Shuggie, Bain by Douglas Stuart. This book is set in the 80s. We follow a young boy named Shuggie as he lives with his alcoholic mother. It takes place in Glasgow, and at the time, Thatcher is prime minister, and so his family is quite poor, and they're struggling week to week to have enough money for food while his mother is spending money on alcohol. He does also live with his father and his two half-siblings, but because his mother's alcoholism is kind of this giant cloud that sits over the entire house, no one really connects with each other or cares for each other. They are all trying to find a way out. The novel actually starts in the 90s with Shuggie as a 16-year-old, and he is living alone in tenement housing without any of his family. And then you go back in time to him as a toddler and watching him grow up. So you know that he's going to end up alone without his parents or his siblings. And you spend the whole book wondering how and why. Shuggie is such a sweet little boy that it really breaks your heart to see him so alone. He is also gay and is ostracized in his community and by his peers for being gay, even when he doesn't understand what gay is or that he is gay. He walks in a sort of feminine way. He's very particular with his hygiene, and so the children really brutally torment him for it. And even the adults use it as a way of attacking his mother. Throughout all of the pain that his mother's alcoholism causes, though, he loves her deeply. Just watching him try to protect her as the rest of his family members have given up and leave him to fend for his own is so sad. But it's so well written. The story really unfolds in a beautiful way, and you can tell that it's really well thought out by Stuart. Sadness made for a better house guest. At least it was quiet, reliable, consistent. That's everything. Those are the 5 books that I have to recommend to you today on loneliness. I hope one of them piques your interest and you pick them up. I genuinely love all of these books and would really highly recommend them. Are there any books that you think encapsulate loneliness extremely well? Please let me know. I'm always looking for more books like this. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I wish you guys all the best reading in the future. Thanks. Bye.